David Rodriguez stared at the stack of reports on his mahogany desk, each one painted with rosy numbers and glowing reviews from his regional managers. On paper, his restaurant chain, Golden Fork Family Dining, was thriving. 58 locations across 3 states, revenue up 12% from last year, and expansion plans already in motion for the next quarter. But something gnawed at him like a splinter he couldn't quite remove. It had been 15 years since he opened his first restaurant in a tiny strip mall, using his grandmother's recipes and a loan that kept him awake at night. Back then, he knew every customer by name, remembered their favorite dishes, and personally checked every plate before it left the kitchen. The warmth of that small dining room, filled with the laughter of families and the aroma of home-cooked meals, had been his entire world. Now, from his corner office on the 20th floor of a glass tower downtown, that world felt impossibly distant. His assistant knocked and entered with another stack of paperwork, reminding him about the board meeting in an hour. David nodded absently, but his attention was caught by something else entirely. A notification on his phone showing the latest online reviews for his restaurants. 3 stars. 2.5 stars. 1 star with a scathing comment about cold food and rude service. His stomach sank as he scrolled through dozens of similar complaints. Customers talking about dirty tables, long wait times, and food that tasted nothing like what they remembered from years past. One review particularly stung. "This used to be our family's favorite place. Now it feels like they don't care about customers anymore." David set down his phone and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Somewhere out there were 58 restaurants carrying his name, serving thousands of customers every day. But when was the last time he had actually sat in one of them as a regular customer? When had he last tasted the food his cooks were serving or experienced the service his staff was providing? The board meeting that afternoon only deepened his unease. Regional manager after regional manager presented their reports with practiced confidence. "Customer satisfaction is up in our sector. We're exceeding profit margins. Staff turnover is within acceptable ranges." But David found himself thinking about those online reviews, about the disconnect between what he was hearing in this pristine conference room and what real customers were experiencing. After the meeting, David's head of operations, a sharp woman in her 40s who had been with the company for 8 years, pulled him aside. "Sir, I noticed you seemed distracted during the presentations. Is everything all right?" David hesitated for a moment. "Tell me honestly, Rachel, when was the last time you ate at one of our restaurants? Not for a business inspection or a manager meeting, but just as a regular customer?" Rachel's pause was telling. "Well, we're always so busy with operations that—" "That's what I thought," David said quietly. "We're all so focused on numbers and reports that we've lost touch with the actual experience we're providing." That evening, David sat in his home office, surrounded by the trappings of his success. Awards lined the walls, photos from ribbon-cutting ceremonies and charity events filled every surface. But he couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere along the way, he had become disconnected from the very thing that had driven him to start his business in the first place, creating a place where families could come together over good food and feel truly welcomed. He pulled up the locations of his restaurants on his computer, studying them like a general planning a campaign. There was one location about 30 minutes from his house, in a suburban shopping center surrounded by middle-class neighborhoods. He had visited it exactly twice, once during the grand opening 3 years ago, and once for a photo opportunity with the local Chamber of Commerce. What was really happening there on a random Tuesday afternoon? The next morning, David made a decision that surprised even himself. Instead of heading to the office for his usual schedule of meetings and conference calls, he drove home during lunch and changed clothes. Gone was his expensive suit, replaced by faded jeans and an old college sweatshirt he found in the back of his closet. He grabbed a worn baseball cap and headed for his car, then stopped. His black BMW with its personalized license plate would be recognized immediately by any employee who had seen the company newsletter. David walked to his garage and looked at his wife's car, a modest sedan that could belong to anyone. She wouldn't be home from her teaching job for hours, and he had a spare key. 10 minutes later, he was driving through neighborhoods he rarely visited, toward a restaurant that bore his name, but might as well have been on another planet. The drive gave him time to think about what he was really hoping to accomplish. Was this just the whim of a successful businessman having a midlife crisis? Or was there something deeper driving him to put on this disguise and venture into the real world of his business? As he pulled into the parking lot of Golden Fork Family Dining Location number 42, David felt a strange mixture of nervousness and anticipation. The building looked exactly as it should. Clean exterior, bright signage, well-maintained landscaping. But looks could be deceiving, as he was about to discover. He sat in the car for a moment, watching customers come and go. A young couple with a toddler in a stroller, an elderly man eating alone by the window, a group of teenagers sharing fries and laughing loudly. These were his customers, real people with real expectations, not just numbers in a quarterly report. David took a deep breath, pulled his cap down low, and walked toward the entrance of his own restaurant, feeling more like a stranger than the man whose vision had created it all. He had no idea that in the next few hours, two young boys at a corner table would say something that would change not just his perspective, but the entire future of his company. The automatic doors slid open with a familiar swoosh, and David stepped inside, ready to discover the truth about what he had built. The first thing David noticed as he stepped through the doors of his own restaurant was the smell. Not the warm, inviting aroma of fresh bread and simmering sauces that he remembered from his early days, but something stale and slightly unpleasant. The air felt heavy, like it hadn't been properly ventilated in days. The hostess stand was unmanned, despite the small line of customers waiting to be seated. A young woman who couldn't have been more than 19 finally appeared from somewhere in the back, her uniform wrinkled and her name tag crooked. She didn't make eye contact with any of the waiting customers, instead focusing intently on her phone screen as she grabbed a handful of menus. "How many?" she asked David without looking up. "Just one, please," he replied, trying to keep his voice steady. This casual indifference was exactly the opposite of what he had trained his staff to provide. Every customer was supposed to be greeted with a smile and genuine warmth. The hostess led him past several tables, and David's heart sank further with each step. Table 12 had crumbs scattered across its surface, and a sticky residue that suggested it hadn't been properly cleaned after the previous customers. Table 8 had a wobbly leg that made the whole surface shake when he accidentally bumped it. The booth cushions were worn and stained, and several had small tears that had been crudely repaired with duct tape. He was seated at a corner table with a clear view of both the dining room and the kitchen pass-through window. The position was perfect for observation, though what he was observing made his stomach churn. This wasn't the restaurant he had envisioned when he signed the lease for this location. This wasn't the experience he had promised his customers. From his vantage point, David could see into the kitchen, where chaos seemed to reign supreme. Servers were grabbing plates without checking them. Kitchen staff were shouting over each other, and dirty dishes were piled high near the dishwasher station. A cook dropped a piece of chicken on the floor, picked it up and put it back on the plate without washing it or starting over. David had to grip his water glass tightly to keep from jumping up and intervening immediately. His server approached after what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 8 minutes. She looked frazzled and overwhelmed, her hair escaping from what had once been a neat ponytail. Her name tag read Crystal, and she had the exhausted look of someone working too many hours for too little pay. "Sorry about the wait," she said, though her tone suggested she wasn't particularly sorry. "What can I get you to drink?" David ordered a coffee and water, then watched as Crystal rushed off to handle 3 other tables simultaneously. She was clearly understaffed and overworked, trying to do the job of at least 2 people. When she returned with his drink several minutes later, the coffee was lukewarm and the water glass had lipstick marks on the rim from a previous customer. "I'll need a clean glass," David said politely. Crystal sighed audibly, as if his request was an enormous inconvenience. "Yeah, okay. I'll be right back." While he waited, David continued his silent inventory of problems. The floor near the kitchen had a suspicious dark stain that looked like it had been there for days. Several light bulbs were burned out, giving the dining room a dim, unwelcoming atmosphere. The music was too loud, forcing customers to shout over it to have conversations. The bathroom door stood ajar, revealing a glimpse of overflowing trash and empty paper towel dispensers. When Crystal returned with his clean glass, David was ready to order. He chose items he knew well: the signature burger that had been on the menu since day one, and the famous loaded potato skins that had been featured in food magazines. These were dishes he had perfected himself, recipes he could make blindfolded. "The burger comes with fries," Crystal informed him. But we're out of fries right now. You can have onion rings for $3 extra or potato salad. Out of fries? At 2:30 in the afternoon? David tried to process this information. Fries were a basic side dish that any restaurant should have available throughout operating hours. How could they simply run out? I'll take the onion rings, he said. While waiting for his food, David observed the other customers and their experiences. An elderly couple at a nearby table waited 20 minutes for their check, repeatedly trying to flag down their server. A family with young children received the wrong order twice before finally getting something that resembled what they had requested. The children were getting restless and crying, but instead of offering any accommodation or apology, the staff seemed annoyed by the disruption. A businessman at the counter was complaining to Crystal about his cold soup. "This is ice cold," he said, pushing the bowl across the counter. "I can't eat this." Crystal's response was defensive rather than apologetic. "Well, the microwave is broken, so that's the best we can do right now." David felt his jaw clench. A broken microwave was no excuse for serving cold soup. There were other ways to heat food, and if equipment was broken, it should be fixed immediately, or the item should be removed from the menu until repairs could be made. When his own food finally arrived after a 30-minute wait, David's worst fears were confirmed. The burger patty was dry and overcooked, clearly having sat under heat lamps for far too long. The bun was slightly stale and the lettuce was wilted. The onion rings were lukewarm and soggy, obviously reheated from a previous batch rather than made fresh, but it was the taste that truly devastated him. This burger bore no resemblance to the recipe he had spent months perfecting. The meat had no seasoning. The sauce was clearly from a generic bottle rather than the special blend he had developed, and the whole thing tasted like it had been assembled by someone who had never eaten a good burger in their life. David took a few bites, each one more disappointing than the last. This wasn't just bad food. It was a betrayal of everything he had worked to build. Customers who came here expecting the Golden Fork experience were instead getting a generic, poorly prepared meal served with indifference. He looked around the dining room with fresh eyes, seeing details that painted an even bleaker picture. The walls were smudged with fingerprints and food stains. The windows were streaked and dirty. Several pieces of decorative artwork hung crooked or were missing entirely. The whole place felt tired and neglected, like a once beautiful home that had fallen into disrepair. As David sat contemplating the magnitude of what he was witnessing, he began to understand why those online reviews had been so harsh. This wasn't the restaurant he had envisioned when he signed his name to the lease. This wasn't the experience he had promised his customers. This was something else entirely, a hollow shell wearing the Golden Fork name but delivering none of its intended warmth or quality. The worst part was knowing that this scene was probably being repeated at dozens of his other locations. If this was what was happening at one restaurant, how many others had fallen to the same standards? How many customers had he disappointed? How many families had chosen his restaurant for special occasions only to receive this kind of treatment? David pushed his barely touched burger away and signaled for the check, his mind already racing with plans for change. But he wasn't prepared for what he was about to overhear at the table behind him. David was just about to signal Crystal for his check when he heard the scraping of chairs behind him. Two young voices filled the air, chattering about school projects and weekend plans. He paid little attention at first, his mind still reeling from the disappointing meal and the state of his restaurant. The boys sounded young, maybe elementary school age, and they were clearly excited about something. David half listened as they debated whether Superman could beat Batman in a race and argued about which video game was better. Normal kid conversation that reminded him of his own childhood, when the biggest worry was whether you'd finish your homework before dinner. Then their conversation shifted, and something in their tone made David's attention sharpen. "I can't believe Mom saved up enough to bring us here for your birthday," said the older voice. "She's been working so many extra shifts." David turned slightly in his chair, just enough to catch a glimpse of the boys without being obvious. They were probably 10 and 12 years old, both wearing clothes that were clean but clearly well worn. Their shoes looked like they'd been passed down from older siblings, and their backpacks were the kind you'd find at discount stores rather than name brands. "I know," replied the younger boy, who must have been the birthday child. "She kept saying we might have to wait until next month. But then she picked up those extra weekend shifts at the hospital. I heard her on the phone telling Aunt Linda that she's been eating those dollar menu sandwiches for lunch every day, so she could save the money. David's chest tightened. Their mother was skipping meals to afford a birthday dinner at his restaurant. The irony wasn't lost on him. Here he was, the owner of this chain, disappointed by a meal that cost more than this family's mother made in several lunch breaks. "Tommy, look at this menu," the older boy said. "Everything looks so good. What do you want for your birthday dinner?" Tommy, the birthday boy, was quiet for a moment. David could hear the pages of the menu rustling as he looked through it. "The spaghetti and meatballs sounds amazing," Tommy said finally. "But it's $18. That's what Mom spends on groceries for 2 whole days. Maybe I should just get the kids' meal. It's only $8 and it comes with a drink and ice cream." "No way," his older brother said firmly. "It's your birthday. You're not getting a kid's meal on your birthday. Besides, you haven't had a real birthday dinner since Dad lost his job. Mom specifically saved up for this so you could get whatever you want." David felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. These children, probably no older than 10 and 12, were having a conversation about money that most adults would find stressful. They understood the value of every dollar in a way that spoke to real hardship, not just careful budgeting. "I just don't want Mom to worry," Tommy said quietly. "She already does that thing where she pretends she's not hungry at dinner so we can have bigger portions. And I saw her looking at the bills last night with that worried face she gets. Maybe we should have just celebrated at home with a cake from the grocery store." "Hey," his brother said, and David could hear the protective tone that older siblings get when they're trying to comfort younger ones. "Mom wanted to do this for you. She's been planning it for weeks. Remember what she said? She said you deserve to feel special on your birthday, just like any other kid. She said Dad would want us to celebrate even if he can't be here right now." David's throat felt tight. These weren't just customers disappointed by poor service and mediocre food. This was a family for whom this meal represented real sacrifice. The mother had worked extra shifts, skipped her own meals, and carefully saved every dollar to give her son one special evening. A new voice joined the conversation, a woman approaching the table. David assumed this was their mother, and when he glanced over, his heart nearly broke. She was probably in her early 30s, wearing scrubs that suggested she'd come straight from work at the hospital. Her face was tired in the way that spoke of long hours and constant worry, but she was smiling as she slid into the booth with her sons. "Sorry I'm late. Boys," she said, her voice warm despite her obvious exhaustion. "My shift ran over, but I'm here now. Are you ready to order, birthday boy?" "Mom, you look tired," Tommy said with concern that seemed too mature for his age. "We could go home and just have leftover pizza if you want." "Absolutely not," she said, reaching over to ruffle his hair. "This is your special day and we're going to celebrate properly. I've been looking forward to this all week. Now what sounds good to you?" David watched as Tommy pointed to the spaghetti and meatballs on the menu, then hesitated. "Actually, maybe I'll just get the grilled cheese from the kids' menu. It comes with chips and a cookie and it's only $8. His mother's expression softened and David could see her understanding exactly what her son was doing. "Tommy," she said gently, "I saved up specifically for your birthday dinner. I want you to get something you'll really enjoy, not just the cheapest thing on the menu. What do you actually want?" "The spaghetti," Tommy admitted quietly. "But it's $18 and the kids' meal is only $8, so that would save you $10. $10 that I saved specifically for your birthday," his mother said firmly. "I've been working extra shifts for weeks just so you could have whatever you want tonight. Please don't worry about the money. That's my job, not yours," the older brother chimed in. "Yeah, Tommy, besides, you're 12 now. You're too old for kids' meals anyway." David felt tears building behind his eyes as he listened to this family navigate their financial constraints with such love and consideration for each other. The mother was trying to give her son a special experience despite obvious financial pressure. The boys were both trying to protect their mother from additional expense while still wanting to enjoy their celebration. This was exactly the kind of family his restaurants were supposed to serve. Hard-working people who didn't have a lot of extra money but deserved to feel welcomed and valued when they chose to spend their limited resources on a meal out. Instead, he was about to watch them pay their hard-earned money for the subpar food and indifferent service he had just experienced himself. When Crystal finally approached their table, David held his breath. Would she be more attentive to this family than she had been to him? Would she show any recognition of what this meal might mean to them? "What do you want?" Crystal said, her tone just as brusque as it had been earlier. She didn't acknowledge that it was Tommy's birthday, didn't offer any of the warmth or hospitality that David had built his entire business philosophy around. As the family placed their order, Tommy finally choosing the spaghetti and meatballs after his mother's gentle insistence, David made a decision. This family was about to have an experience that would either create a beautiful birthday memory or disappoint them terribly. Given what he'd witnessed so far, he was afraid it would be the latter. But David was the owner of this restaurant, even if nobody knew it. And sometimes being the owner meant taking responsibility for making things right, even when, especially when, your own systems had failed. He quietly pulled out his phone and began making some calls. David sat frozen in his chair, listening to the family behind him navigate their order with Crystal's dismissive service. The mother asked politely if they could substitute the expensive garlic bread for regular bread rolls, and Crystal responded with an exaggerated sigh, as if the request was completely unreasonable. "I guess," Crystal said, making it sound like she was doing them a huge favor. "But the kitchen probably won't like it. They're pretty busy back there." David watched the mother's face flush slightly with embarrassment, and he felt anger building in his chest. This woman was a paying customer making a simple, reasonable request, and she was being treated like she was asking for something outrageous. The lack of basic courtesy was inexcusable. As Crystal walked away without offering drinks or explaining how long the food might take, David pulled out his phone and stepped outside, claiming he needed to make a call. The afternoon sun felt good on his face after the stale atmosphere inside, but his mind was racing with everything he needed to do. First, he called his assistant. "Karen, I need you to clear my schedule for the rest of the day. Cancel the 4 o'clock meeting with the Henderson Group and reschedule the conference call with the investors." "Sir, the Henderson meeting has been planned for 3 weeks. Are you feeling all right?" "I'm fine," David said, pacing in the parking lot. "I'm handling something more important right now. Also, I need you to get me the contact information for the general manager of Location 42. And Karen, this is urgent." Next, he called his head of operations. "Rachel, I'm at the Oakview location right now and we need to talk. But first I need you to do something for me immediately." "Of course, sir. What do you need?" "I need you to call the manager of this location and tell them to send their best server and their head cook to table 15 right now. There's a family there celebrating a birthday, and they need to receive the best service we can provide." "I don't care what it takes," Rachel paused. "Sir, are you conducting some kind of inspection?" "Something like that," David said. "Just make it happen. And Rachel, after you make that call, I want you to pull the customer satisfaction scores for this location over the past 6 months. I have a feeling they're going to tell a very different story than what we've been hearing in our reports." His third call was to the corporate office, to the person who handled special events and community relations. "Linda, I need you to arrange something for me, and I need it done within the hour. I need a birthday cake, professional quality, with Happy Birthday Tommy written on it. I need it delivered to the Oakview location immediately." "Sir, that's quite short notice. May I ask what this is for?" "It's for a customer whose birthday celebration means more than you can imagine. Make it the best cake we can get. Cost is not a factor." After hanging up, David stood in the parking lot for a moment, watching other customers come and go. An elderly couple walked slowly toward the entrance, probably looking forward to a nice meal out. A young father carried his toddler while his wife gathered their diaper bag from the car. These were the people his restaurants were supposed to serve with excellence, and instead they were walking into the same disappointing experience he had just endured. He went back inside and returned to his table, positioning himself where he could continue observing the family while appearing to mind his own business. The boys were sharing stories about school while their mother listened with genuine interest, despite her obvious tiredness. Their love for each other was evident in every interaction, and it made what was about to happen even more important. David's phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. "Manager says their best server called in sick and they're short-staffed. Kitchen is backed up because the dishwasher broke this morning. Sir, this location has been struggling with equipment failures and staffing issues for months." Another text followed immediately. "Customer satisfaction scores for this location have dropped 40% in the past 4 months. Multiple complaints about food quality, service, and cleanliness. The regional manager's reports haven't mentioned any of this." David felt his jaw clench as he read the messages. So the regional manager had been filing false reports, hiding the problems instead of addressing them. This location wasn't an anomaly. It was a symptom of a larger problem in his organization. He watched as the family's food finally arrived after a 40-minute wait. Tommy's spaghetti and meatballs looked nothing like the carefully crafted dish David had designed. The sauce was clearly from a jar. The meatballs were obviously frozen and reheated, and the pasta was overcooked. The garlic bread they had specifically requested had been replaced with plain dinner rolls without any explanation or apology. The disappointment on Tommy's face was subtle, but unmistakable. This wasn't the special birthday dinner he had been hoping for. His mother tried to mask her own disappointment, encouraging him to eat and asking if everything tasted good. Tommy nodded and said it was fine, but David could see that it wasn't fine at all. "The meatballs are a little cold," Tommy said quietly to his brother. His mother overheard and looked around for Crystal, who was nowhere to be seen. Another server walked by and she politely flagged him down. "Excuse me, could we get these meatballs warmed up a bit more?" The server looked annoyed at being asked to handle a table that wasn't his. "That's not my section. You'll have to wait for your server." David had seen enough. This family had saved their money, worked extra hours, and planned this celebration with such care and love. They deserved so much better than what they were receiving. But more than that, every family who walked into any of his restaurants deserved better than this. He quietly paid his own check with cash, leaving a generous tip for Crystal despite her poor service. Then he stepped outside again and made one more call. "Linda, it's me again. In addition to the cake, I need you to arrange something else. I want you to get a gift card for our restaurant chain, loaded with enough money for a family of 3 to eat here once a month for an entire year. And I want a letter written on our corporate letterhead, explaining that this is a thank you gift for being loyal customers. Sir, that's going to be quite expensive. May I ask what the occasion is?" "The occasion," David said, watching through the window as Tommy tried to smile while eating his disappointing birthday dinner, "is that I'm remembering why I went into the restaurant business in the first place." As he waited for his plan to unfold, David realized that this moment was about much more than one family's birthday dinner. This was about the soul of his company, and whether he was going to continue letting bureaucracy and cost-cutting destroy the vision he had worked so hard to build. The family behind him had reminded him of something crucial. Restaurants aren't just businesses. They're places where life happens, where families celebrate milestones, where people gather to connect, where moments are created that last long after the meal is over. He had built Golden Fork to be that kind of place, and somehow, somewhere along the way, he had lost sight of that mission. But it wasn't too late to remember, and it wasn't too late to change. David watched through the restaurant window as Tommy pushed his lukewarm spaghetti around his plate, trying to be brave about his disappointing birthday dinner. The boy's mother was doing her best to keep the mood positive, asking about his favorite classes at school and making jokes about the upcoming weekend. But David could see the strain in her smile, the way she kept glancing at her watch, probably calculating how much this meal was costing per minute. His phone buzzed with updates from his team. The cake was on its way. The gift card was being prepared. But David realized that food and money, while important, weren't really what this situation called for. What this family needed was to feel valued, to feel like their choice to celebrate here mattered. 20 minutes after he'd made his calls, David saw a young woman in a crisp Golden Fork uniform enter the restaurant carrying a large white cake box. Behind her was a man in chef's whites, clearly the manager from a nearby location who had been called in to help. David watched through the window as they approached the confused Crystal, who pointed toward table 15 where the family was sitting. The manager, whose name tag read Kevin, approached the family's table with the kind of warm smile that David had always insisted should greet every customer. The woman carrying the cake box positioned herself nearby, and suddenly what had been a disappointing evening began to transform into something magical. "Excuse me," Kevin said, his voice carrying the kind of genuine warmth that had been missing from their entire experience. "Are you Tommy?" Tommy looked up from his barely touched spaghetti, confusion written across his young face. "Yes? Well, Tommy, we heard it was your birthday today, and we wanted to make sure you had a celebration worthy of such an important day." Kevin signaled to the woman with the cake box, who stepped forward and opened it to reveal a beautiful chocolate cake with perfect frosting and "Happy Birthday, Tommy," written in bright blue letters. Tommy's eyes went wide and his mother's hand flew to her mouth in surprise. "I don't understand," the mother said, looking around as if this might be some kind of mistake. "We didn't order a cake." "You didn't need to," Kevin said with a smile. "Sometimes birthdays need a little extra magic, and we wanted to provide that magic for Tommy." But David had arranged for more than just cake. Kevin placed an envelope next to the cake on their table. "Tommy, this is for you and your family. Happy birthday from all of us here at Golden Fork." With shaking hands, Tommy opened the envelope and pulled out a letter written on official company letterhead. His mother read it aloud, her voice getting softer with each word. "Dear Tommy and family, your kindness and love for each other has inspired everyone here today. We hope this gift card will allow you to create many more special memories together. Happy birthday, Tommy, and thank you for reminding us why we do what we do." Inside the envelope was a gift card loaded with enough money for monthly family dinners for an entire year. But there was something else too. A handwritten note that David had dictated over the phone. "The greatest wealth isn't money. It's the love of family. Thank you for showing us what really matters." Tommy's mother began to cry. Not tears of sadness, but tears of overwhelming gratitude and relief. For months, she had been carrying the weight of providing for her sons while dealing with her husband's job loss and their financial struggles. This unexpected kindness was more than just a free meal. It was validation that their love for each other had value, that their efforts to stay positive and support each other had been noticed. "Who did this?" she asked Kevin, looking around the restaurant. "I need to thank them properly." Kevin smiled mysteriously. "Let's just say it was someone who understands how important family celebrations are. Someone who believes that every birthday should be special." As the family shared the cake and laughed together, their first genuine laughter of the evening, David quietly slipped out of the restaurant. He had seen enough to know that his plan was working. But more importantly, he had learned everything he needed to know about what was wrong with his company and what needed to change. Over the next several weeks, David threw himself into a complete overhaul of Golden Fork family dining. He started by firing the regional manager, who had been filing false reports, and hired someone with actual restaurant experience who understood that customer satisfaction couldn't be faked in quarterly reports. Every location underwent surprise inspections, not by corporate executives in expensive suits, but by regular people hired to eat there as customers and report on their genuine experiences. Equipment was repaired or replaced. Staff received extensive retraining on hospitality and food quality. Wages were increased to attract and retain better employees. But the changes went deeper than operations. David instituted a new policy. Every Golden Fork location would provide free birthday cakes for children's celebrations, no questions asked. They established a program called Family First Fridays, where families facing financial hardship could apply for free meals. They created a scholarship fund for employees wanting to advance their education or culinary training. Most importantly, David made it a requirement that every executive, from regional managers to corporate vice presidents, spend at least one shift per month working in a restaurant as a regular employee. No special treatment, no advance notice to the staff. They would bus tables, take orders, and clean bathrooms until they remembered that their job was to serve the people who made their paychecks possible. The transformation wasn't immediate, and it wasn't cheap. Some investors complained about the decreased profit margins in the short term. A few executives quit rather than adapt to the new standards. But within 6 months, customer satisfaction scores began to climb. Online reviews improved dramatically. Most importantly, families started choosing Golden Fork not just because it was convenient or affordable, but because they felt genuinely welcomed there. David never told anyone about his undercover visit or about the family that had inspired the changes. Tommy and his family continued to visit their local Golden Fork once a month, never knowing that their conversation about birthday sacrifices and family love had transformed an entire company. They just knew that somehow their neighborhood restaurant had become a place where they felt valued and appreciated. A year later, David sat in his office reviewing the annual reports. Revenue was actually up despite the increased costs of better ingredients and higher wages. Employee retention had improved dramatically. The company had won several awards for community service and customer satisfaction. But the report that meant the most to him was a simple online review from a customer in Oakview. Took my son here for his 13th birthday last night. The staff was wonderful, the food was delicious, and they surprised him with a free birthday cake. This is exactly the kind of place where families should celebrate together. Thank you for caring about your customers. The review was signed Tommy's mom. David smiled and made a note to have Kevin check on that location soon, not as an inspection, but as a reminder that behind every table, every order, and every meal, there were real people with real stories, real struggles, and real dreams. And sometimes all it took to change someone's day, or someone's entire company, was remembering to listen.